Jake Mitchell sat in his wooden cabin and watched the storm roll across the mountains. He had seen many storms in his 5 years living alone in the Colorado wilderness, but this one felt different. The lightning was not the usual white or blue color. Instead, it flashed green and purple across the dark sky like nothing he had ever seen before. The wind howled against the cabin walls and rain hammered on the roof. Jake stood up from his chair and walked to the window. Something about this storm made his old military instincts kick in. He had learned to trust those instincts during his years as a pilot. They had saved his life more times than he could count. Thunder crashed so loud that the cabin shook. Jake grabbed his flashlight and rain jacket. He needed to check the storage shed behind the cabin. The last thing he wanted was for the roof to collapse and destroy his supplies. He stepped out into the storm and the wind nearly knocked him over. Rain soaked through his jacket within seconds. He made his way around the cabin, fighting against the wind with each step. The beam of his flashlight cut through the darkness and rain. When he reached the storage shed, he noticed the door was open. Jake froze. He always kept that door locked. His hand moved to the knife on his belt as he approached slowly. The flashlight beam swept inside the shed and Jake saw something that made his breath catch in his throat. A woman sat huddled in the corner, but she was not like any woman he had ever seen. Her skin seemed to glow with a faint silver light. Her ears were pointed and long. She wore armor that looked like it was made from metal that moved and shifted like it was alive. Next to her lay a creature that Jake could barely understand. It looked like a dragon from old stories, but smaller, about the size of a large dog. Its scales shimmered with colors that seemed impossible. Blues and purples and colors Jake did not even have names for. The creature was breathing but barely moving. The woman looked up and her eyes met his. They were large and bright like stars. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then fear flashed across her face. Real terror. She scrambled backward and raised one hand toward him. Purple energy crackled around her fingers like electricity. She spoke in a language Jake did not know. Her voice was musical but urgent, almost panicked. The dragon creature stirred and made a low sound that was somewhere between a growl and a whimper. It was trying to protect her even though it could barely move. Jake slowly raised both hands to show he meant no harm. His heart was pounding, but he kept his movements calm and steady. The woman kept talking in her strange language. She pointed at him, then at the sky, then made a cutting motion across her throat. Whatever she was trying to tell him, it was not good. He noticed a small device attached to her armor near her shoulder. It was damaged and sparking. The woman saw him looking at it and touched it with shaking fingers. The device made a crackling sound, and then a mechanical voice spoke in broken English. Warning. Danger. Humans. Coming. Jake felt his blood run cold. Someone was hunting this woman, and they were close. The woman pointed at him again and said something. The device translated in its broken way. You, human. They, kill. You, too. She was not just afraid of him. She was afraid for him. That realization hit Jake hard. This strange, beautiful creature with pointed ears and glowing skin was trying to warn him even though she was terrified of him. The dragon made another weak sound and the woman placed her hand on its head gently. Jake made a decision. He did not know who this woman was or where she came from. He did not know what that creature was or why someone was hunting them, but he knew what it looked like when someone needed help. He had walked away from people who needed help once before. He was not going to do it again. He pointed to himself and said his name slowly, Jake. Then he pointed to the cabin and made a gesture for them to follow. The woman stared at him with those star-bright eyes. She did not move. Jake could see the fear and confusion on her face. She was trying to decide if she could trust him. Another flash of that strange green lightning lit up the sky. The woman flinched and looked up. She said something to the dragon creature and it made a soft chirping sound in response. They were communicating somehow. Jake was sure of it. The woman slowly stood up. She was tall and moved with a grace that seemed almost unnatural. She carefully lifted the dragon creature in her arms. It was clearly heavy, but she held it like it weighed nothing. She looked at Jake one more time and then nodded slightly. Jake led them through the storm back to the cabin. Every instinct told him this was going to change everything. Whatever was happening here was bigger than just a storm and a strange woman and her dragon. As they reached the cabin door, Jake looked up at the sky. More of that green lightning flashed across the clouds. Inside the cabin, Jake helped the woman lay the dragon on the floor near the fireplace. She knelt beside it and placed both hands on its side. The silver markings on her skin began to glow brighter. The dragon's breathing became a little easier. Jake grabbed towels and blankets. The woman was soaking wet and shivering. He offered her a towel, but she hesitated before taking it. Her hands were shaking, not from cold but from fear. Jake sat down across from her, keeping his distance so she would not feel threatened. The woman touched her translation device again. It sparked and flickered but managed to produce words. Name: Lyraean. Jake nodded and repeated it quietly. Lyraean. She touched the dragon, gently, and the device spoke again. Stormwing. Hurt. Need. Help. Jake looked at the wounded creature. He had no idea how to help a dragon. He barely believed dragons were real, but he knew about wounds and injuries from his military days. He stood up and went to get his medical kit. When he returned, Lyran watched him carefully as he opened the kit. He showed her the bandages and antiseptic. She seemed to understand. Together they began to clean and wrap the worst of Stormwing's wounds. The dragon made soft sounds but did not fight them. As they worked, Jake noticed something. The fear in Lyran's eyes was slowly being replaced by confusion. She kept looking at him like she could not understand something. Finally, her device crackled to life again. Why? You? Help. Me. You. Human. The way she said that last word made Jake's stomach twist. There was so much pain and fear in it. What had humans done to make her so afraid? He met her eyes and wished he could explain. Wished he could tell her that not all humans were the same. That some of them still tried to do the right thing. But all he could do was keep helping her tend to Stormwing's wounds, and hope that his actions would speak louder than words. Outside, the storm raged on, and somewhere out there in the darkness, someone was coming. Someone who wanted to hurt this strange woman and her dragon. Jake made another decision in that moment. Whoever was coming would have to go through him first. Kate stood frozen in the cell as Solara's words echoed through her mind. The Devourers. The name itself carried weight like a physical thing pressing against her thoughts. Amy shouted from outside again, but Kate raised her hand to signal she was fine, even though nothing felt fine at all. Solara moved back to her bed and sat down with fluid grace. The dragon followed and settled beside her with its tail curled around its body. Solara gestured for Kate to sit as well, but Kate remained standing. Her training told her to maintain distance and control, but her instincts told her something far more important was happening here. Kate asked Solara why she had stayed silent for so long if she had such vital information to share. Solara's mental voice came through clearly as she explained that she had been searching. She had been waiting and watching every human who came near her cell. She was looking for someone specific, someone who carried certain markers in their blood and bones. The explanation made no sense to Kate. She asked what markers and why it mattered. Solara tilted her head in a way that reminded Kate of the dragon. The alien woman said that her people were called the Ethel and they were very old. Older than human civilization by thousands upon thousands of years. Long ago the Ethel fought the Devourers and lost. They lost badly. Kate felt her legs weaken and finally sat down on the floor across from Solara. She needed to hear this story even if it sounded impossible. Solara continued speaking through that strange mental connection. She said that before the Ethel fell, they created a plan. They seeded genetic markers across the galaxy in primitive species. They hoped that someday, somewhere, a new civilization would evolve those markers into something useful. Something that could fight what the Ethel could not. The dragon made a soft sound and Solara placed her hand on its head. She called the creature Ashran and said they were bonded at the soul level. Where one went, the other followed. They were two parts of one whole. Kate watched this interaction and felt something shift in her understanding. This was not a pet or a guard animal. This was a partner in the deepest sense. Solara looked directly at Kate with those endless violet eyes. She said that Kate carried the markers. Not perfectly and not completely, but more than any other human Solara had encountered in 3 years of watching and waiting. Kate was the first person who could potentially access what the Ethel had left behind. Kate's mind raced with questions, but before she could voice them, the cell door burst open. Amy rushed in with her weapon raised and 3 security guards followed behind her. Amy demanded to know what was happening, because the monitoring equipment showed strange energy readings coming from inside the cell. The whole station was on alert. Kate stood quickly and ordered everyone to stand down. She told them that the prisoner was communicating and that it was safe. Amy lowered her weapon slowly but kept it ready. She told Kate that Admiral Bennett was demanding an immediate report. The Admiral had seen the energy spike and wanted answers now. Within an hour, Kate found herself in a secure conference room facing Admiral Bennett through a video link. The Admiral's face looked tired and lined with stress. Kate gave her report, explaining everything Solara had revealed about the Ethel, the Devourers, and the genetic markers. She watched the Admiral's expression shift from interest to skepticism to something that looked like desperate hope. Admiral Bennett asked the obvious question. If the Covenant were running from these Devourers, why attack humanity instead of asking for help? Kate admitted she had asked Solara the same thing. The answer was complicated. The Covenant leadership did not know the full truth. Only certain elite warriors like Solara knew about the Devourers. The Covenant military simply followed orders to secure territory without knowing they were fleeing an even greater threat. The Admiral leaned back in her chair and rubbed her temples. She said that this story sounded convenient. An enemy suddenly claiming they were refugees from an even bigger enemy. It was the oldest trick in the book. She asked Kate if she truly believed Solara, or if this might be some elaborate manipulation. Kate thought carefully before answering. She told the Admiral that something in Solara's mental voice carried absolute truth. It was not just words but feelings and images. Kate had seen flashes of memory during their connection. She had glimpsed worlds being consumed, stars going dark, entire civilizations vanishing into nothing. The terror in those memories felt too real to be fabricated. Admiral Bennett made a decision. She gave Kate 48 hours to prove Solara's claims. If Kate could provide any concrete evidence that these Devourers existed, the Admiral would take it to the military council. If not, Solara would be transferred to a maximum security facility, and Kate would face disciplinary action for breaking protocol. Kate returned to the detention level where Amy was waiting. Her second-in-command looked worried and angry at the same time. Amy said that Kate was risking her entire career on the word of an enemy prisoner. She said that even if Solara believed what she was saying, it could still be Covenant propaganda designed to create confusion and division among human forces. Kate understood Amy's concerns because she shared some of them. But something deep inside her knew that Solara was telling the truth. Kate asked Amy to trust her judgment for just 2 days. Amy sighed heavily and agreed but said she would be watching closely. Solara was waiting when Kate entered the cell again. This time, Kate came prepared with questions written down on a datapad. She needed specifics, evidence, anything that could prove the Devourers were real. Solara nodded and said she would share memories directly. It would be intense and possibly painful, but it was the fastest way. Kate agreed without hesitation. Solara stood and approached her, then placed both hands on either side of Kate's head. The dragon Ashran moved closer as well, pressing against Kate's leg. Then the memories flooded in like a dam breaking. Kate saw through Solara's eyes as the Devourers arrived at an Ethel colony world. The ships were not metal and machines like human vessels. They were organic, alive, pulsing with stolen life force. They moved through space like predators stalking prey. When they reached the planet, they did not attack with weapons. They simply opened themselves and began to feed. The planet died in hours. Everything living was pulled into those hungry ships. Plants withered to dust. Animals collapsed and dissolved. People screamed as their very essence was drained away. The Ethel fought with everything they had, but their weapons barely scratched the Devourer ships. And when the feeding was done, the planet was left as a gray husk, empty of all life down to the microbial level. Kate gasped and pulled away from Solara's touch. She fell to her knees, breathing hard. The memories had been so vivid, so real. She had felt the terror of those dying people. She had felt Solara's helplessness as she watched her world consumed. Solara knelt beside Kate and waited while she recovered. When Kate could finally speak again, she asked how humanity could possibly fight something like that. Solara's answer was both hopeful and terrifying. She said the Ethel had built weapons before they fell, powerful weapons designed specifically to fight the Devourers. But those weapons required something the Ethel never possessed in sufficient quantity. Kate asked what that something was. Solara said it was courage born from love. The Ethel were logical and ancient and wise, but they had lost the fierce protective instinct that young species possessed. They had forgotten how to fight with desperate determination for those they cared about. Humans had that quality in abundance. The genetic markers would allow certain humans to access the lethal weapons, but human emotion and will would make those weapons truly effective. Kate understood then why Solara had been searching so carefully. She needed someone who carried both the genetic markers and the human capacity for fierce protective love, someone who would sacrifice everything to protect others. Kate asked what happened next, and Solara said they needed to locate the nearest weapon cache. The dragon Ashran suddenly raised its head and made a sharp warning sound. A moment later, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Amy's voice came through the communication system saying that long-range sensors had detected something at the edge of the solar system. Multiple large contacts were approaching, and they matched no known human or Covenant ship signatures. Solara stood quickly with fear clear on her face. She said one word that made Kate's blood run cold. Scouts. The Devourers had sent scouts ahead of their main force. They had arrived earlier than anyone expected. Humanity had days at most, not weeks or months. The time for proof and debate was over. Now came the time for action and war. Jake led them deeper into the forest, moving quickly but carefully. Behind them, he could hear soldiers shouting and dogs barking. They were tracking them. Stormwing was moving better now, but still limping. The dragon kept looking back with its intelligent
eyes. Every few minutes it would make soft chirping sounds to Lyrian. She would respond in her musical language. Jake realized they were actually talking to each other, not just animal and owner, but real communication. They climbed higher into the mountains.
Using paths Jake had mapped over 5 years. The soldiers were good, but Jake knew the terrain better. He knew which paths led to dead ends, which streams would hide their scent from the dogs, which caves would give them shelter. After 2 hours of hard climbing, they reached a narrow canyon. Jake stopped and held up his hand. Lyrain and Stormwing froze beside him. A helicopter passed overhead, flying low, searching. Jake pressed them all against the rock wall and waited. The helicopter circled once, and then moved on. When it was gone, Jake let out a breath he did not know he was holding. They kept moving. As the sun rose higher, Stormwing suddenly stopped. The dragon turned its head and looked directly at Jake. Its eyes were like liquid silver, swirling with colors. Jake felt something strange, like a presence in his mind. Gentle but curious, Lyrian noticed and spoke quickly. Her device translated. Stormwing wants to know if you can be trusted. He carries something important. He must be sure. Jake did not know how to respond to a dragon reading his mind, but he stood still and tried to think clearly. He thought about why he left Morrison, about the families he saw, about his regrets, about his choice to help Lyrain. After a moment, Stormwing made a low, rumbling sound. Sounded almost like approval. Lyrain looked surprised. He trusts you. That is rare. Stormwing does not trust easily, especially not humans. They continued moving, and Lyrain explained more about Stormwing. The dragon was not just her companion. He was bonded to her through something the Aetheran called a neural link. They shared thoughts and feelings. What one experienced the other felt. It was an ancient bond that only a few Aetherans still practiced. But Stormwing carried something else, data encrypted in his mind, locations of free Aetheran fleets, names of resistance fighters, both alien and human codes, that could help coordinate a rebellion against Morrison. That was why Morrison wanted Lyrain captured alive. Without Stormwing, she could not access the data, and without Lyrain, Stormwing would never share it. They needed each other. By midday, they had covered nearly 20 miles. Jake found a cave hidden behind a waterfall. They slipped inside to rest and eat. Jake shared his emergency rations. Lyrain ate, carefully watching him. Stormwing curled up near the cave entrance, keeping guard. Jake pulled out an old radio from his pack. He turned it on and listened to the military frequencies. What he heard made his blood run cold. A familiar voice came through. The static captain, Amy Holland, his former squad mate. His friend Amy was leading the search. She was giving orders to the ground teams, telling them to sweep the mountains in a grid pattern. Jake closed his eyes. Amy was good. Maybe the best tracker he ever knew. If anyone could find them, it was her. Lyrain noticed his expression. You know her. The one hunting us. Jake nodded slowly. We flew together for 3 years. She saved my life twice. I saved hers once. We were close. Lyraean looked away. Her voice was quiet when she spoke. Will she kill me? Jake wanted to say no, but he could not lie. I do not know. Amy follows orders always. That is what makes her a good soldier, but maybe not a good person. They listened to the radio for a while longer. Amy was reporting back to someone. She sounded stressed. The voice on the other end was cold and demanding. Jake recognized it, Admiral Morrison herself. She wanted Lyraean found within 24 hours. She told Amy that failure was not acceptable, that Amy's family status depended on success. Jake understood now. Morrison was threatening Amy's family, her husband and 2 kids back on Earth. If Amy failed, they would lose everything. Their home, their privileges, their safety. Morrison had built her empire on fear and control. She kept people loyal by holding their loved ones hostage. Jake felt sick. Amy was not hunting them because she wanted to. She was hunting them because she had no choice. He turned off the radio. Lyraean was watching him. What will you do if we meet her? Jake thought about it. I will try to talk to her, try to make her see the truth. But if she will not listen, if she tries to hurt you, then I will stop her. Lyraean nodded. You would fight your own friend. For me. For someone you met yesterday. Jake met her eyes. I would fight for what is right. That is all. They rested for another hour. Then Stormwing suddenly stood up. His scales rippled with color. Warning, Lyraean jumped to her feet. Soldiers coming close. Jake grabbed his pack and they moved to the back of the cave. There was a narrow passage that led deeper into the mountain. They squeezed through just as voices echoed outside. Soldiers had found the waterfall. They were checking the cave. Jake led Lyraean and Stormwing through the darkness. He used his flashlight sparingly. The passage twisted and turned, sometimes so narrow they had to crawl. Behind them, Jake heard the soldiers entering the cave. Flashlight beams cut through the darkness. They were coming. The passage suddenly opened into a larger chamber, but there was no other way out. They were trapped. The soldiers were getting closer. Jake could hear their boots on stone, their radios crackling. Amy's voice giving orders. Lyraean looked at Jake with panic in her eyes. Jake raised his rifle. He did not want to fight, but he would if he had to. Then Stormwing did something incredible. The dragon moved between them and the passage entrance. Its scales began to glow, soft at first, then brighter. Colors swirled across its body, purple and blue and silver. The air around them began to shimmer. Lyraean placed her hand on Stormwing and closed her eyes. The silver markings on her skin lit up bright as starlight. She whispered something in her language. The shimmering spread. It covered all 3 of them like a bubble. Jake felt strange, tingly, like electricity on his skin, but not painfully. Soldiers entered the chamber, 5 of them with rifles and lights. They swept their beams across the space. The lights passed right over Jake, Lyraean, and Stormwing. But the soldiers did not see them. It was like they were invisible. Or not quite invisible, more like the soldiers' eyes just could not focus on them. One soldier walked within 3 feet of Jake. Jake held his breath, but the soldier just kept walking. After a few minutes, the soldiers gave up. This chamber is empty. Nothing here. They left. The sounds of their boots faded. Lyraean kept the shimmering field up for another 10 minutes. Then she collapsed. Stormwing caught her before she hit the ground. The dragon gently laid her down. Jake knelt beside them. Lyraean was breathing hard, sweating. That took too much energy. I'm sorry. I cannot do it again soon. Jake helped her sit up. What was that? Some kind of technology. Lyraean smiled weakly. My people call it the ancient art, but you would call it biotechnology. Very advanced. We do not use machines like you do. We grow. Our tools, we bond with living things. We work with nature instead of against it. That is why you thought it was magic. Jake was amazed. The Atheran were far more advanced than he realized. They just hid it behind what looked like magic in nature. After Lyraean recovered enough to walk, they found another exit from the cave system. By sunset, they were high in the mountains. Far from the soldiers, Jake knew where they needed to go now. Mount Cheyenne, 200 miles northeast. That was where Lyrian believed the human resistance had a base. It would take them at least a week on foot through dangerous terrain. But they had no choice. As they made camp that night, Lyrian asked him a question. Her voice was quiet, thoughtful. Jake, if your people could do this too, mine could turn from allies to conquerors so quickly. What makes you different? How do I know you will not change? Jake did not answer right away. It was a fair question. Maybe the hardest question anyone had ever asked him. Finally, he spoke. I do not know. If I am different, I only know that I try to be. Every day I have to choose to do right or to do wrong, to help or to hurt, to stand up or to walk away. I walked away once, I will not do it again. That is all I can promise. Lyran looked at him for a long time. Then, she nodded. That is enough for now. They sat in silence watching the stars come out, somewhere out there. Morrison was building her empire. Somewhere out there, the last free Etheran fleets were hiding, and somewhere between here and Mount Cheyenne was a resistance that might change everything. Jake looked at Stormwing. The dragon was staring at the sky, its eyes reflecting starlight. He wondered what the dragon was thinking, what secrets it carried in its mind, what hope it represented. Tomorrow they would start the long journey to Mount Cheyenne. But tonight they would rest, and Jake would try to believe that one person could still make a difference, even against an empire. 7 days later, Jake and Lyran reached Mount Cheyenne. The journey had been hard. They traveled only at night, hid during the day, avoided roads, and town's military patrols were everywhere searching. Twice they came within yards of being discovered. Each time Stormwing sensed danger before the humans did. The dragon had recovered fully now. His wounds were healed and his strength had returned. He moved through the forest like a shadow, silent and deadly when needed. Jake had seen him take down a deer with one strike, had watched him generate small bursts of energy to start fires. The dragon was far more than just an animal. He was a weapon, a guardian, a friend. Mount Cheyenne rose before them in the early morning light. The old military complex had been abandoned for 20 years, or so the official record said. But Jake knew better. He had heard whispers during his last year in the service, stories of deserters gathering, of people who refused Morrison's empire. The resistance was small. Maybe a few hundred, maybe 1,000. Nobody knew for sure. Jake led them to the northern entrance, a tunnel that had been sealed off decades ago. But when they arrived, the seal was broken. Fresh marks on the metal. Someone was using this entrance. They moved inside carefully. The tunnel was dark and cold water dripped from the ceiling. Their footsteps echoed. After 100 yards, they saw light ahead. And voices. Jake raised his hand and they stopped. He called out, I am Jake Mitchell, former pilot under Morrison. I left 2 years ago. I have someone with me. Someone you need to meet. Silence. Then movement-armed figures emerged from the shadows. 5 men and women, all carrying weapons, all pointing them at Jake and Lyran. One woman stepped forward. She was older, maybe 50, with gray hair and hard eyes. She studied Jake for a long moment. I know you, Mitchell. You refused to bomb that settlement. Morrison wanted you executed. Jake nodded. Who are you? The woman lowered her weapon slightly. General Claire Bennett. I used to command the 5th Fleet, until I saw what Morrison was doing. Now I command this. She gestured to the tunnel around them. What is left of humanity's conscience? Claire's eyes moved to Lyran. And who is this? An Etheran. You brought one of them here. Lyran stepped forward, her chin raised, defiant. Despite the weapons, I am Lyran, Scout Commander. I carry information that could help you fight Morrison. Claire laughed, but there was no humor in it. Help us. Your people started this. You brought humanity into your war. You created the monster that Morrison became. Lyran did not back down. We asked for help against the Devourers, not conquest, not empire. We wanted allies, not masters. The 2 women stared at each other. Tension filled the air. Jake stepped between them. We did not come here to argue about the past. Morrison is hunting Lyran. She carries data in her dragon locations of free Etherean fleets, names of resistance members, information that could coordinate a real rebellion. Claire looked at Stormwing. The dragon stared back unafraid. After a moment, Claire lowered her weapon completely. Come with me. We have much to discuss. They followed Claire deeper into the mountain. The complex was bigger than Jake expected. Hundreds of people lived here. Families with children, former soldiers, scientists, people who had fled Morrison's regime. They all looked tired, worn down, but still fighting. Claire led them to a command center. Maps covered the walls. Old computers hummed with power. A dozen people worked at stations. Claire, turn to Lyrian and show me what you have. Lyrian placed her hand on Stormwing's head. The dragon's eyes began to glow. Images appeared in the air above them. Holographic projections, locations of Etherean fleets scattered across 3 star systems, names and faces of resistance members on Earth and other worlds, communication, code supply routes, and something else. Evidence, videos, and documents showing Morrison's crimes. Civilian populations bombed, entire colonies destroyed for refusing to join the Empire, alien species, enslaved planets stripped of resources. The people in the command center watched in horror. Some turned away. Others cried. Jake felt sick. He had known Morrison was bad. But this was worse than he imagined. Claire stood frozen, her face pale. I knew it was bad. But this? She looked at Lyran with new respect. You risked everything to bring this here. Why? Lyran's voice was steady. Because some things are worth dying for. Freedom, justice, truth. And because I still believe some humans are good. Claire nodded slowly. Then we worked together. She turned to her people. Get me a communication plan. We need to broadcast this across human space, show people what Morrison really is. The command center burst into activity. People ran to stations, started planning. For the first time in years, there was hope. Jake felt it a chance to actually fight back, to make a difference. But then a woman entered the room. She looked nervous, scared. Her name was Lisa Grant. Jake had met her earlier. She had a daughter back on Earth, under Morrison's control. Lisa approached Claire. General, I need to speak with you. Privately. Claire shook her head. Whatever you have to say can wait. We have work to do. Lisa's hands were shaking. Please. It is important. Claire sighed and followed Lisa to a corner. They spoke in low voices. Jake watched them. Something felt wrong. His instincts were screaming. Then, he saw Lisa glancing at a computer terminal, her fingers moving subtly, typing something. Jake moved fast. He grabbed Lisa's hand and pulled her away from the terminal. What are you doing? Lisa's face crumbled. Tears streamed down her eyes. I am sorry. I am so sorry. They have my daughter. Morrison has her. She said if I helped catch the Etherean, she would let her go. Claire's face went hard. What did you do? Lisa. What did you tell them? Lisa sobbed. I sent them our location. They are coming. They will be here in minutes. The command center erupted in chaos. Claire started shouting orders. Evacuate the families. Secure the data. Prepare to fight. But it was too late. Explosions rocked the mountain. The walls shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. Morrison's forces were here. They came fast, and hard soldiers poured into the tunnels. Gunfire echoed through the complex. People scattered. Running, fighting, dying. Jake grabbed Lyran's hand. We need to move. Now Stormwing led them through the chaos. The dragon seemed to know where to go. They ran through corridors as explosions shook the mountain. Behind them, soldiers were advancing. Claire and a handful of her people fought a desperate rear guard action, buying time for others to escape. Jake and Lyrian reached a junction. 3 paths. Stormwing chose the left one. They ran. The tunnel sloped downward, getting steeper. Jake realized where they were going, the old mining tunnels, the deepest part of the complex. They emerged into a massive chamber, ancient equipment rusted and forgotten. A dozen other survivors were there, including Claire. She was wounded, blood on her shoulder, but still standing. Is this everyone? Claire nodded grimly. Everyone who made it. Maybe 30 people. We lost over 200. Lyrian looked devastated. This is my fault. They came for me. Claire shook her head. They came because we dared to resist. That is not your fault. That is Morrison's. More explosions above them. The tunnel entrance began to collapse. They were trapped. The survivors looked at each other with fear. This was the end. Then Stormwing moved to the center of the chamber. The dragon's scales began to glow, brighter than ever before. Energy crackled around him, purple and blue and silver light. Lyrian's eyes went wide. Stormwing. No, you are not strong enough yet, but the dragon ignored her, planted his feet and roared. The sound was like thunder pure power. An electromagnetic pulse exploded outward from Stormwing. Jake felt his hair stand on end. The old mining equipment sparked and died. But something else happened. A shield formed around them. Dome of shimmering energy, rocks and debris from the collapsing tunnel hit the shield and bounced away. The survivors stared in amazement. Stormwing was protecting them all, creating a barrier. Nothing could penetrate. Claire laughed in disbelief. Your dragon just saved our lives. Lyrian placed her hand on Stormwing, tears in her eyes. He's using everything he has. We need to find a way out before he exhausts himself. Jake looked around the chamber. There had to be another exit. Old mining tunnels always had multiple ways out. Then he saw it, a narrow shaft in the corner, partially hidden by debris. That is our way. The survivors began moving toward it, helping each other, carrying the wounded. Above them, soldiers were trying to break through Stormwing's shield. But they could not. The dragon held firm as the last person entered the shaft. Jake looked back. Stormwing was glowing so bright it hurt to look at. The dragon met his eyes, and Jake understood. Some things were worth protecting. Some things were worth the sacrifice. They crawled through the shaft. It led to an old exit tunnel a mile from the mountain. When they emerged, the sun was setting. They had escaped, but barely. Claire gathered everyone together. We need to keep moving. Morrison will send more forces. But first we broadcast. That data show the galaxy, what she really is. Jake looked at Lyrian. She was holding Stormwing close. The dragon was exhausted but alive. They had survived, lost many, but survived, and now they had a chance. A real chance to fight back, to expose Morrison. To maybe change everything. The small group of survivors disappeared into the wilderness behind them. Mount Cheyenne burned, but they carried something Morrison could not destroy: hope, truth, and the will to keep fighting. The survivors traveled for 2 days before reaching the abandoned NASA facility. It stood alone in the desert, forgotten by most people. But Claire knew it held something valuable. A quantum communicator, powerful enough to broadcast across the entire galaxy. If they could get it working, they could expose Morrison to everyone, human and alien alike. The facility was in bad shape: windows, broken equipment covered in dust, but the main systems were still intact. Claire's tech people got to work immediately. Jake stood guard with Lyrian and Stormwing. The dragon was still weak from creating the shield. He had saved 30 lives, but it had cost him greatly. Lyrian stayed close to him, whispering in her language, comforting him. After 6 hours, Claire came to find them. Her face was grim. The communicator works, but we have a problem. It needs 30 minutes to charge and align with the satellite network, and we just picked up signals. Morrison's forces are coming, a full battalion. They will be here in less than an hour. Jake felt his stomach drop. How many? Over 300 soldiers, gunships, heavy weapons. Morrison herself is leading them. She wants to personally oversee the capture. Claire looked at Lyri. And I am sorry. We cannot hold them off that long. Not with 30 people. Lyrian stood up, her face determined. Then we give you the time you need. We fight. Claire shook her head. You will die. All of us will die. Lyrian placed her hand on Stormwing. The dragon looked up at her with those intelligent silver eyes. Some things are worth dying for. Jake stepped forward. She is right. We came this far. We cannot give up now. The survivors prepared for battle. They had limited weapons and ammunition, but they had position and determination. Jake found himself thinking about his years in the military, all the missions he flew, all the orders he followed. This was different. This time he was fighting for something that actually mattered. Morrison's forces arrived exactly when Claire predicted helicopters and armored vehicles surrounded the facility. Soldiers took positions, setting up a perimeter. Then a voice boomed through speakers. "This is Admiral Kate Morrison. You are surrounded. Send out the Etherin and the Dragon. Do this, and the rest of you will be allowed to live. Refuse, and you will all die here." Claire picked up a radio. "This is General Claire Bennett. We refuse." Morrison's voice came back cold and hard. "Then you have chosen death. Prepare to be eliminated." The attack began. Gunfire erupted from all sides. The survivors fired back, trying to hold their positions, but they were outnumbered 10-1. Slowly, Morrison's soldiers advanced, taking the outer buildings, pushing closer. Jake found himself next to the main door, fighting alongside 2 other survivors. They took down soldier after soldier, but for everyone that fell, 2 more appeared. Inside, Claire shouted updates. 20 minutes until broadcast, 15 minutes, 10 minutes. The facility walls were being torn apart. Explosions shook the building. Half the survivors were already wounded or dead. This was the end. Then, Jake saw her, Amy Holland, his former friend. She was leading a squad toward the main entrance. Their eyes met across the battlefield. For a moment, everything else faded. Jake stood up, exposing himself, waving his arms. Amy, stop. Please listen to me." Amy raised her hand. Her squad stopped firing. She approached slowly, weapon raised but not shooting. Jake stepped out into the open, his rifle lowered. Amy looked older, tired. There were dark circles under her eyes. "Jake, you should have stayed hidden. You should have let this go." Jake shook his head. "I cannot let it go. None of us can." Amy, "You know what Morrison is doing is wrong." Amy's weapon trembled. "I have orders. My family. My children. If I fail them, Morrison will." Jake cut her off. "I know she is holding them hostage. That is how she controls everyone, through fear." Amy's face cracked. Tears formed in her eyes. "What choice do I have? If I do not follow orders, my kids will suffer." Jake pulled out a small device. The data chip from Stormwing. He held it up. "This contains proof of everything. Morrison has done. Proof of her crimes. Proof that she is the real enemy. Not the Etherin, not the Resistance." Amy stared at the chip. Jake threw it to her. She caught it, looked at it, then at him. "Watch it, Amy. See the truth. Then decide." Amy hesitated. Her squad waited, watching her. She plugged the chip into her helmet display. For 5 minutes she watched. Her face went pale, then red with anger. Jake saw the moment she understood. The moment everything changed. Amy looked up, her voice shaking. "All those people. Those families. Morrison told us they were military targets, that they were threats, but they were just people, living their lives." Jake nodded. "Now you know. Now you have to choose: follow orders and be part of the horror, or stand with us and fight for what is right." Amy looked back at her squad, then at Morrison's command vehicle in the distance, then at Jake. She lowered her weapon. "I choose to fight." Her squad looked shocked. One of them raised his rifle at Amy, but another soldier pushed it down. "No, she is right. We have been lied to." One by one, Amy's entire squad lowered their weapons. Then something incredible happened. Other soldiers saw it. They stopped firing, started questioning, asking what was happening. Amy got on the command frequency. "All units, this is Captain Holland. I have evidence of Morrison's war crimes, real evidence. She has been lying to all of us about everything." Morrison's voice came back furious. "Holland, you are relieved of command. All units, open fire immediately. That is an order." But the soldiers hesitated. Some kept fighting, but others stopped. Confusion spread through Morrison's forces inside the facility. Claire shouted, 5 minutes until broadcast. Jake and Amy ran inside together. Lyraean stared at them in shock. "You brought a hunter inside." Jake shook his head. "Not anymore. She is with us now." Morrison's voice boomed through the speakers again. "So be it. If my soldiers will not do their duty, I will finish this myself." A massive gunship descended. Morrison herself appeared, flanked by her personal guard, 20 elite soldiers, all loyal only to her. They stormed the facility, cutting through anyone in their way. Claire's people tried to stop them, but Morrison's guard was too well trained, too well equipped. They reached the main room. Morrison stood there, tall and cold, her eyes scanning, until they found Lyrian. There you are. The alien that started all this trouble. Lyran stood her ground. I did not start anything. You did when you chose conquest over peace. Morrison laughed. Peace is weakness. Humanity was weak for too long. Now we are strong now. We rule. She raised her weapon, aimed at Lyran. But Stormwing moved between them. The dragon was weak, barely standing, but he would not let Morrison hurt. Lyran. Morrison's eyes gleamed. The dragon too? Perfect. She aimed at Stormwing. Jake jumped in front of the dragon. Noemi stood beside him, both of them protecting Stormwing, and Lyran. Morrison's guard raised their weapons. This was it, the end. Then Claire shouted, "Broadcast is live." We did it. In that moment, everything changed. The broadcast went out across every human communication network, every screen on Earth, every ship in space. Millions of people saw Morrison's crimes, saw the evidence, saw the truth. On Earth, people began to pour into the streets. Protesting military units started refusing orders. The empire Morrison built began to crack in the facility. Morrison's face twisted with rage. It does not matter. I still have my guard. I still have loyal forces. I can still win this. But her guard was looking at each other, uncertain. They had seen the broadcast too. Seen what? They had been part of one by one. They lowered their weapons. Morrison screamed at them, "Traitors, all of you." She raised her weapon to fire at Lyrian. But Amy was faster. She tackled Morrison, knocked the weapon away. Other soldiers rushed in. They arrested Morrison. Battle was over. In the days that followed, everything changed. Morrison's empire collapsed. Her loyalists surrendered or fled. The Etheran Collective was freed. Peace talks began. Jake and Lyran became ambassadors, helping to rebuild trust between their species. But there was a cost. Stormwing had used everything he had to help power the final broadcast. His body had started to crystallize. Turning to stone, in his final moments, Lyrian held him. Jake stood beside her. The dragon looked at them both with peaceful eyes. Through their bond, Stormwing showed Lyran one last vision. Humans and Etheran working together, not in war but in peace-building. Something beautiful. Then he was gone. They built a memorial for Stormwing in the facility courtyard. People from across the galaxy came to see it, to honor the dragon who sparked a revolution. Lyran visited every day, placing her hand on the crystal statue, feeling the faint warmth still inside. One evening, Jake found her there. She was crying softly. He sat beside her, said, "Nothing, just stayed with her." After a while, Lyran spoke. He knew this would happen. He chose it anyway. Jake nodded. That is what heroes do. They stood together watching the sunset. Above them, ships from dozens of species flew in formation, human and alien working, together building a new future. Lyran looked at Jake. "When I first saw you, I was terrified. I thought all humans were monsters." Jake smiled sadly. "Some of us are, but some of us are trying to be better." Lyran took his hand. "That is all anyone can do. Try." The memorial glowed softly in the fading light, and somewhere in that crystal Stormwing's spirit remained, a reminder that courage and sacrifice could change everything. That even in the darkest times, hope could survive, and that some lights, once lit, would never truly go out.